Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into, yet again, a brewer. I've never had anything from prior, and it's a porter today. We got our nice trusty porter glass. The specific brewer is called Main Mill Brewing Company. They're based in Festus, Missouri, and this beer is called Hello Newman. So label art on here. If you're a Seinfeld fan, this ought to look pretty familiar. I'm trying to angle it down to get off the glare. But they say right on here that this is a muffin top inspired porter, which is one of the favorite episodes from most diehard Seinfeld fans. And this specific porter has been brewed with blueberries, vanilla, toasted oats, and cinnamon. So it sounds absolutely awesome. This one clocks in at 8% ABV. They do not classify this as an imperial porter, but with this significantly higher than average ABV, they certainly could. So we'll leave it at that. Label art really awesome. The ingredients list sounds awesome. So without further ado, let's get this cracked. Gently, gently. All right. Get this poured right in the old porter glass. This whole beer will not fit in here, obviously. All right. Yep. Pouring a classic porter dark brown. It's not super thick. Seems to be doing a decent job with the head here. I probably could have been a bit more aggressive, but this one seems to be doing a pretty good job here. Regardless. Visually, it is very dark, but it is not pitch black as expected. Indeed, at the very bottom of the glass where it's a bit thinner as it tapers down, I can see light through there. Not heavily. It is quite dark. I can tell you it's also got a very pronounced aroma. From 1.5 feet away, I can strongly smell blueberry, and I can really smell that roasty malt bill. Indeed, it's giving off these coffee aromas. There's no coffee in this beer, but it is that level of roast. That's what we're talking. Yeah, this one did form a nice head. Porters do tend to be active in terms of carbonation. This one is no different. Mostly smaller, finer kind of effervescence coming up, so that's probably why the head's still got some pretty nice cling and a nice little pad. It's going to continue to try to form. But it looks great. Let's get right up over it for a full sniff. Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay, so very roasty malt bill. You can really smell the level of roasting. Like I said, there is a fair bit of coffee-like aroma coming off of it. And the blueberries are really dominant on the nose. Now, I can't smell anything in here that I would say, oh, that smells like toasted oats. And I really can't pick up the cinnamon or the vanilla on the nose, but we'll see how this all works together when we get to jump in. So without further ado, dive number one. Ooh, man, that is delicious. What a fantastic combination of ingredients. A lot of layers opening up here. This is a big beer. This is a very big beer. Definitely larger than your average porter. It's got more pungency to it. Granted, 8% ABV, you would expect that. But these additives as well, they're a real driving force in the intensity of this beer. And it's absolutely delicious together. So the first thing I want to talk about is the mouthfeel. There's a really nice bit of resistance on this one. It definitely feels more thick, more sumptuous than your average porter. Again, we're dealing with a higher ABV, 8%, that's to be expected. Agitation does make this one feel quite creamy as well. In terms of the body, this is a big full medium, maybe starting to teeter-totter on the border of medium heavy. It feels right for 8% ABV. It's a really nice texture and weight to this porter that really does let you know, yeah, I'm drinking a higher than average ABV on this one. Really nice. In terms of the flavor profile, when you swallow, you get this dual mix of two things right up front. And it is big roast from the malt bill. And indeed, some of those aromas that smell coffee-like, they do impart some coffee-like flavors in this beer. Again, that's all coming just from the roasted malts. There is no coffee in this one. But the real big centerpiece of this, aside from a very well-structured base beer, is the blueberry. You never really know how additives are going to speak in a beer, but this really does smell and taste very blueberry dominant. It's absolutely delicious. This is a flavor that I wouldn't have thought to pair in a porter, but it absolutely works in this, especially with this kind of blueberry muffin vibe they're going for. It's got the added toasted oats, cinnamon, and vanilla. Now, as I said, the cinnamon and the vanilla, I really wasn't picking up in the aroma. The same thing is true in the flavor profile here, but there was a lot of information I was processing on this first sip on a beer I've never had. So as always, I'm going to jump back in, have a second sip, let everything re-intensify, see specifically if I can find any notes of that cinnamon and that vanilla that's in this, and then we'll talk about the finish. But on first sip, it's absolutely delicious. Take two. Roasty malt, blueberry, coffee-like undertones, slight suggestion of sweetness, which is really letting the blueberry taste like it should, taste actually like blueberry. Yeah, again, even on second sip, the vanilla has not yet popped out to me. The cinnamon, there's just a little hint after about the 5, 6, 7 second mark when the intensity of the blueberry starts to dial down a bit. You can start to get some of the cinnamon. It is faint. It's definitely not a star of the show. Clearly that belongs to the blueberry, but it's there. The vanilla, I'm still really not picking out. Okay, now I've got it. It comes in on the back end of the finish. As the intensity of the blueberry continues to go down and down and down and down, that's when the cinnamon and the vanilla start to pop a little bit. And again, it is subtle. You've really got to be working and paying attention to find it, but it is on the end of the finish. It doesn't pop in the front. The blueberry and the roasted edge of the malt is just too intense for the balance and volume of the added vanilla and cinnamon. But it does come on. They do have their part to play, and it's on the end of the finish. So speaking of the finish, this is definitely longer than your average porter. What is driving it on this one is really the additives. I'm not getting any lingering roast from the malt bill, no coffee-like flavors, no cacao, no earthiness. It's really all the drivers from the additives they put in here. The blueberry is predominant, and there's that little underlying bit of vanilla and cinnamon, though they dissipate to nothingness long before the blueberry. It's really still residual blueberry that pushes out the end of this, and it really, to me, seems to be the star of the show in this beer. And I'm perfectly fine with that. It's absolutely delicious. So maybe personally, would I tweak the balance a little bit, let the vanilla and cinnamon have an equally large voice? And certainly the toasted oats, it's not a flavor you're really going to pick out, say, oh yeah, that tastes like toasted oat in the beer. Really not in something like this with all these other additives, but it's definitely playing a part, and I'm sure that it's binding to this really well put together malt bill for this base porter. But I got to say, it's absolutely delicious. Not a flavor combination I would have thought of, but it absolutely works. Fantastic beer. Truly, truly great first representative beer from any new to me brewer. I absolutely love it. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, come up with my scores. When we come back, we'll get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Main and Mills Brewing Company's Hello Newman, a porter clocking at an 8% ABV, brewed with blueberries, vanilla, toasted oats, and cinnamon, and Main and Mill is based in Festus, Missouri. So starting with the aroma. This was one of those that was just absolutely massive. A foot and a half away, 2 feet away on a porter. Getting huge aromas is quite rare. This one was really, really pungent with its aromatic intensity, and I was getting tons of roasty malt notes, even some underlying coffee notes coming off of that malt bill, and then the blueberries in particular were just massive. It smelled amazing. The aroma does get a 10 out of 10. For the taste, I absolutely loved this beer. The flavor profile on it was phenomenal. Really, the only thing I could say was a flavor balance for me. The cinnamon and the vanilla, they did finally make their appearance, but they were very, very subtle. They were undetectable on the aroma side, but really on the taste side, they just were a little subtle for my liking. I would have liked them to have a little more presence to balance out with that really nice underlying malt bill that they chose, and of course the blueberry. But I absolutely love what I did get. Taste gets a 9 out of 10. For the body, This was a very robust porter, which matched the ABV. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel, very much a more resistant mouthfeel than your average porter. This one felt right and really matched with that body. For this higher ABV, exactly as expected. Mouthfeel gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish, this was certainly longer than average to be certain, and really on the end of this one, it was the blueberry that was the dominant driving factor. There were just elements of the cinnamon and vanilla that really came on the front side of the finish, and then they kind of dissipated. And a little bit of that lingering underlying kind of coffee-like vibe coming off of the malt bill, but it was really the blueberries that truly extended it out above average, and the finish does get a 7 out of 10. Head and retention. This one did a pretty good job, certainly above average. It fell down a little quicker than I thought, considering that even though porters kind of are all over the board, this one had a little tighter effervescence, and it formed pretty well up front, but it did break down a little quicker than anticipated. Still above average though. Head and retention gets a 7 out of 10. For the appearance, textbook porter gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this beer in general, I really appreciated. For sure, I would say it's above average for what they did with it, but we talked about this on the flavor side. I would have liked a bit more vanilla and cinnamon. It's awesome that it was detectable if you're really paying acute attention and picking apart what it is you're experiencing, that it did make its presence known on the end of the finish, but it was still very, very subtle even there. In fact, I'm not sure that the average person drinking this would even be able to tell that it had a vanilla or cinnamon in it. You really had to be paying attention, truly have properly aerated it around the palate to let everything speak. But it was still really, really nice. I thought it was above average overall. Minor little nitpicks here. Balance does get a 7 out of 10. Filling in the intangible. Subjectively, I loved it. Gets a 10 from me. Finally, is an example of the style. So overall, this beer did quite well. It lost a few points in a few categories, nothing too big. Really, the balance is where it got hit, finish, and the head and retention. That's where it lost the most points. Not that many, and just a random point in a couple other categories, but this is clearly well above average. I absolutely loved what I got out of this beer. Really, really nice beer to have as a first example of what a brewer is about. Example of style on this one does get a 9 out of 10. Which brings Main Mill Brewing Company's Hello Newman to an 89 out of 100. This is well above average. It was absolutely delicious. A few little minor things that I personally would have tweaked, but you know, I'm not the brewer. The brewer has license to brew how they want, what they want, in the volume that they want, and we get to enjoy what they do. And despite losing some points and a few little things I would have done differently, I gotta say, it was absolutely delicious. Despite wanting a little more vanilla, a little more cinnamon in there to kind of help balance out the blueberries, it was absolutely delicious. And I come back to the blueberries on this one. That is not an ingredient I would have ever thought to put with a porter at all, but it absolutely worked. And this higher ABV made it all the nicer. I think it made for a far more robust beer, give me a long multi-hour sipping enjoyment experience, and it was absolutely delicious. I would recommend this to any flavored porter fan. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.